we have now Mark Cinkevich, which is actually the name is an alias of an interdisciplinary artist and researcher from Lagoysk in Belarus. He's exploring infrastructural and social landscapes and how they intersect. He looks into the topics of nuclear colonialism, extractivism, and monstrosity. His practice combines research, investigation, and speculative approach with particular attention to the post-Soviet context. His works were presented at Transmediale, Berlin, Sterlischer Herbst, Graz, BFI, London Film Festival, and many others. I'm giving you a mic.
So hello everyone. Thank you ICN for letting me present you in detail this insane mess that we are in. So I'm going to talk about the Belarusian identity. It's been undergoing some intensive and largely invisible to an external eye transformations. These transformations quite unexpectedly went beyond ethno-nationalist frameworks that were often used to describe the opposition movement in Belarus, as well as beyond the state-proposed narrative, which can be summarized as sort of like Russia's little brother. Super brief historical overview. Belarus as an independent state appeared in 1991. It briefly existed in 1918-1919 before being absorbed by the USSR, but it didn't appear out of nowhere. It existed in the 10th century as a Principality of Turov, as a Principality of Polotsk. Then it was a part of Grand Duchy of Lithuania, which is somehow mistakenly attributed to just Lithuania nowadays, and then a part of Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, then part of Russian Empire, and then it became a part of USSR that we are more aware of. So Belarusian identity was not really much appreciated during this time, and it was forcefully eradicated together with language, because Soviet Union was interested in promoting this idea of a Soviet citizen, which was meant to be without nationality, only a Soviet citizen. This erasure of Belarusian identity was happening not only at the beginning of the Soviet times, but throughout. I like this example. This is the picture from the cemetery in Belarus, which kind of gives the idea. So the man died in 1967, and his wife died in 1985. And you can see the order of the surname in the name. So man has his name first, and then his wife has her surname first. And having the surname first is a Russian way of ordering things. So very much to an invisible extent, this Russification has been happening. So by the end of 1990s, nationalism in Belarus was weaker than in any other post-Soviet country. And what's more interesting is that Belarusian state actually now sees itself as the direct heir of BSSR, and actually the most loyal heir of the USSR in the entire post-Soviet space. Because the former country was based on BSSR, it has the most pronounced Belarusian Soviet identity rather than the Belarusian ethnocultural one. And the continuity with BSSR is the part of an official discourse in the modern Belarus. When Lukashenko came to power in 1994, what he did is he removed all the Belarusian textbooks from school. He moved the country's Independence Day from the day of the liberation of to the day of the liberation of Minsk from Nazi troops in 1944 to July 3rd, from the day of the adoption of the Declaration of Sovereignty. The Great Patriotic War has become the core of state ideology because it kind of spreads the identity core. Many structures remain the same, for example, KGB, and many institutions like pioneer movements still exist in Belarus. We still basically live in the Soviet idea. The de-Sovietization never happened, so one of the most important Belarusian researchers, Akudovich, says that Soviet past actually plays a key role in Belarusian identity because it's the only direct thing to the contemporary state. And he goes on to claim that it's quite impossible to come back to pre-Soviet Belarus because first, Soviet has never been equated to colonial, and second, because to revive some historical Belarusianness is quite a futile attempt, because before Soviet Russia, Belarus was colonized by Poland before. So this consistent neo-Soviet position of Belarusian leadership changed the way Belarusian society sees Soviet heritage, which in turn influences all the dynamics that we are seeing now. And after the collapse of the USSR, Belarus continued to inhabit this Soviet thing in the context where the original oppressor, Soviet Russia, kind of dissolved. And however, one of the most important Belarusian researchers, Nelly Bekus, notices that Lukashenko draws not only from the Soviet legacy, but also from national heritage, which was true. For example, in 2014, Lukashenko started, because of the revolution in Ukraine, he started something like what we later termed to be soft Belarusianization. It amounted for the promotion of national language and flirting with civil society, sort of like to try to detach a little bit from Russian orbit. And this was mainly a trick played to get some favors from the European Union. But yeah, it's not to be confused with the scale down of repressions. For example, if you're somehow displaying your identity beyond what state allows you to, you will be punished. So the example on the left is March of Will, traditional march by the opposition, and on the right is the image of where all the participants ended up at the end. So, however, Soviet discourse has been absorbed by today's Belarus. It's not to be confused with the lack of danger from Russia. And this is like a funny thing. Apparently, some documents leaked that Russia is planning to absorb Belarus by 2030, but it's a slow kind of news. This process has already been happening since 2008, and it was finalized in 2020, actually. And the reason for this is the infrastructural integration. The reason is nuclear power plant, actually. The nuclear power plant is a Russian project. Russia provided money for the project, Russia provided technology, Russia provided specialists, and Russia provides uranium fuel for it. But the thing is, a nuclear power plant created an overproduction which is of such a scale that Belarusian energy system cannot simply consume all the overproduced energy. So it started depending on Russia also as a consumer of this overproduced energy. So Russia supplies resources, Belarus overproduces, and then Russia absorbs. So Belarusian energy system stopped functioning as an independent energy system. And in the context where it's impossible to trade this energy because you can't store electric energy, where it's impossible to trade it neither to European Union, neither to Ukraine for obvious reasons. The only available direction is Russia. So as a result, it created a sort of like a colonial vortex for the infrastructure, since also the intensification of war and like a launch of full-scale invasion of Ukraine by Russia, Belarus got infrastructurally separated from all the neighboring countries, including Lithuania, Poland, Latvia, and Ukraine. So there is literally like a gap in infrastructure. All the transmission lines were disassembled, all the railway roads were disassembled. So all the Belarusian logistics is now going through Russia. So Russia obtained full control over what can be sold, what is going into, what is going outside of Belarus. And this resulted in Belarus becoming a sort of like a border. It was a border territory before that, but it became even more of a border territory. And when you try to research a borderland like this, there are different features, but borderlands are always characterized by two things, which is, one is temporary communities. All the communities are really temporary. You go in, you go out really briefly. This allows for sort of role play, assuming identity, becoming somebody that you are not, and extreme violence, because borderlands are places of no law. So You saw those like images with national symbols. So again, the chase, the guy on the horse returned in 2020 as if out of nowhere. Following the rigged presidential elections, Lukashenko claimed he got 80% of the votes, which was just outrageous lie. 300,000 people at the peak of activity went to the street, and it was mass mobilization really across the entire country. It was a cross alliance with workers from factories, medical professionals joining the strikes, mostly first-time activists, a lot of youths, not mostly, a lot of youths. Also established opposition, everybody became engaged. And first the protest was happening in the city center. However, the protest was faced with, it was just a military operation for retaining power. It was not a police crackdown on protest. So the protest lost and was forced to the suburbs. So later, something like, can we pause it? Yeah, should have been no sound, sorry. Can we play it without the sound? Something like protest yards have become the most common form of protest, which is apparently these country yards, these protest country yards, are residential spaces that are typically located in the Soviet-style apartment blocks, and they got transformed into these hubs of local solidarity, mutual aids. Infrastructures of mutual help started to appear just out of nowhere, growing sort of. The protest has become super trivial, like super banal. So people would just gather together, and this was in itself a sign of anti-governmental action. So they would do like evening gatherings, musical performances, public lectures, film screenings. It didn't even need any political slogans to be already seen as a political activity against government political activity. So this is like a series of meetings that got really big, but didn't manage to become, to provoke a change in the government, unfortunately. But they were characterized by very horizontal, very community-driven character. There was no centralization. There was no central opposition kind of like controlling it. They were established by regular people living in these neighborhoods, retirees, students, regular workers, many of whom met for the first time. So this localized form of protest allowed for become a form of adaptation and allowed for the resistance to continue and become like everyday resistance through small acts like singing, displaying symbols, even holding flashlights or clapping hands. The language, to the surprise of many of the intellectuals who were writing on Belarus, didn't become central Belarusian language, and much of the protest was happening in Russian language. So you could see the posters from the protest. They are in English, they are in Belarusian, they are in Russian as well. Another one. The music of the protest was also interesting because there were songs like traditional Belarusian song Kupalinka that became one of the like main things during the protest, but also these two guys who are called the DJs of changes. They played a song during one of the governmental rallies, the opposition song, which is just a song "We Want Changes" by Viktor Tsoi from. He was a Soviet singer. And another important song was a song Razbury Turmy Mury, which is just an adaptation of a Catalan song, actually, to the Belarusian language. So the identity was drawn from a variety of sources. And also the ethno-nationalist perspective, it didn't really find itself in the contemporary art. And one of the most important examples is this exhibition called Every Day in Mistetsky Arsenal, which was exploring the process of identity formation that is going on so intensively, but without overemphasizing this ethno-nationalist motifs. So this is very interesting because this red, white flag and all the slogans that were before associated with traditional oppositions, they got reappropriated by this new sort of freshly born movement that united students, doctors, factory workers, businessmen, artists, women association, retirees, and like many others. And it came to the surprise of the traditional opposition themselves, because alternative Belarusianness exploded in popularity overnight, and it ceased to be associated with linguistic Belarusianization and ethnocultural activism, and stood broadly for the movement against tyranny. This became the glue that was tying these people together. So not only these symbols, they got recycled, but they all also got reappropriated. And this went very much in contrast with much of the classic postcolonial theory that was produced on Belarus, where the idea was mainly that Belarus is a country that lacks subjectivity, lacks its own subject, that has non-protesting population. And Belarusian revolution in this way is not, didn't follow the trade that many was expecting it to follow. And mostly also because it is so difficult to discern a single oppressor and to build a narrative against a specific oppressor. So that oppressor became the person inside the country or the president. And can we play it without the sound? So the society has split into two parts, the government and the militia, and on the other hand, the civil society, for the lack of a better word. And each side view other side as absolute monsters. So government choose the strategy of trying to punish everyone and go absolutely after everyone who displays a slightest side of disagreement. And since it's been like 5 years by now, the scale of the repression didn't scale down. And this is the fight, this is the domain where fight is happening right now. So one of the reasons why we saw such a scale of brutality in Belarus was the anonymity of militia employees. And it is something that has always been protected by the regime. Cars without license plates, paramilitaries with no badges or emblems, police disguised as civilians became the key features. And they were the key features of KGB, but since KGB continues to exist, they persist in Belarus. So opposition as a tactic, so they were trying to go after everyone. So the opposition as a tactic chose the tactic of de-anonymization. And here you can see an example of a speculative AI that identifies, supposedly identifies police officers using this software. However, it was later revealed, we can pause the video, it was later revealed that the software was just fiction, it didn't exist, but it made its point as to make police sort of scared for their future, to make it clear that penalty will be, that they will be punished, it just extended into the future, so somewhere in the future the justice will be restored. And even though this AI has been sort of speculative, Belarusian opposition managed to actually compile the database of the police officers, and they usually stored in Telegram channels like this. So on the left you see a bot with data of either judges or police officers associated with the regime. So it became kind of like a modern time bestiary. Bestiaries are these medieval books that are a list of monsters. Once you get there, you're classified as monster, you can't get out. So the opposition created this kind of bestiary, but the government also created its own kind of bestiary, which is KGB search list. So the country appeared in a situation where the two bestiaries were each other were written. So, and when you determine who is in the bestiary, you sort of determine what is normality. So there appeared these two narratives that competed with each other. And so Belarusian government went a little bit further and used not only technology but all the possible things as to make this justice in the future sort of impossible by trying to render de-anonymization impossible. So, for example, these people are fake witnesses in the court who testify against you. They usually arrive in the court in escorted way, so as to prevent recognition by the people in attendance. Sometimes they also give their testimonies via Skype, like this, under fake names, and it has been openly admitted just for the purpose of retaining their anonymity. So militia officers, they're keen to hide their face because face is like a threshold to public space, and it exposes not only you but also people who you are associated with. So the refusal to be represented by the government is so visible. Like, for example, Lukashenko was awarding a group of forces, official forces, diplomas for impeccable service, and these are the images that they posted. They feature no faces, so the soldiers, they just reduced to sort of like Agent Smith-like figures, just body parts without faces, disposable bodies, basically. And all the images that are published by the government to sort of like intimidate or sometimes document, but many times intimidate, like this, for example. These are images from the national training called Man with Attitude by Belarusian military. And these are the actual images posted on Soviet Belarusia newspaper. So they would use this sort of like post-production to obscure the faces, to make it impossible to recognize them. And so the entire idea is that in the end, they would be capable of committing crimes in the middle of broad daylight while retaining anonymity, while refusing to be represented, at the same time trying to get after all the opposition. So these men are from the main Directorate for Combating Organized Crime and Corruption in Belarus. They are usually like middle-aged men with sort of like short haircuts in civilian clothes. They usually openly carry video cameras, like the guy on the left. This is all like inheritance from the Soviet tikhari, which means silent. This type of employees who just record. So this is the type of a struggle that Belarus is facing right now, where you cannot display or like show any type of like identity openly, because you are being sort of recorded, watched, monitored, and usually there are police officers in disguise sort of sitting everywhere next to you. And so Belarusians were developing this sort of like invisible language that is hardly recognizable for others, but can be read by the fellow protesters. And I want to quote from Jan Barshevsky, a writer who was collecting Belarusian myths. And in one of his myths, villagers see how a fellow villager shapeshifts into a werewolf. And he is asking, what is wrong with you? Why do you look so intimidating, as if you were an animal? And another villager replies, indeed, his eyes gleam like those of a wolf. Don't look at him, my child, for he will kill you with his horrible sight. So the same, it's allusion to this gleamy eyes, something that always gives away, something that is hard to pronounce, but something that you develop a sort of inner feeling about when you're there. So this presentation draws from a variety of research to try, in an attempt to try to form a narrative, because nowadays it's so difficult to study what is going on in Belarus, not only because of marginalized, like sort of, there's not much interest, let's say, in the country, but also because inside the country there is no research produced. There is no Academy of Science in Belarus, there is no research that taps into this topic. So in the end, all the intellectuals, all the researchers have been forced out of the country. So it's one thing when you are studying country from the abroad, and another thing when everybody is studying the country from abroad. But what we can say as the conclusion, like 5 years from the most important event in the contemporary Belarusian history, is that this white, red, white flag has become decoupled from nationalism, and like much of the symbols, it has become stripped of its initial identity and become reappropriated. And there is a disconnection of Russian language from the idea of oppression somehow in the public audience, and also the development of this invisible language of resistance, but also the intuition of detecting who are you with and who are you against. So this is further sped up by the technology, and like this being sort of like a borderland territory, because everybody is role-playing, because you can't stay for a long time, you have to be super careful. If there are really people there, it's becoming increasingly difficult to tell what are they like, and become increasingly difficult to study that. And while we cannot really at this point anticipate what is going to be happening in the future, what we can tell is that the dynamics that are ongoing are like those of mutation, basically. Yeah. Thank you.